Today's episode is brought to you by Dorrington Plumbing, Gas and Electrical, and they provide quality-focused specialists for both residential and commercial plumbing, gas and electrical services. They've been doing this since 1995 and have built up a substantial reputation within the sector. If you're interested in these services, head to www.dorringtonplumbing.com.au.
So hello, I'm Ben Kosterich and this is the Market Bull podcast. Joining me in the studio today, I have Chris Gale, the Executive Chairman, and Mitch Thomas, the CEO of Solis Minerals. Now, it's listed on the ASX under code SLM. Now, for many, and I'll flash back actually, Chris, we spoke, it would have been a good 15 or 16 months ago when you were at Latin, and this will become part of the talking points as we go. But you're both here to talk about the new phase and the new exploration scene that you're both taking on. But yeah, firstly, welcome to the show, gents.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers, mate.
For those that are unfamiliar with either of you, I might start with you first, Chris. For those that may or may not know about your background, do you mind just briefly explaining a little bit about your experience and in particular, I guess your interest in South America, because you've seemed to operate a lot in there throughout your mining career?
Sure. So my background is as I'm an electrical technician. In my early years, I installed process systems into mines, talking a long time ago, but about 22 years ago, I started getting into capital markets through a couple of associates, good friends now. I liked what was happening with this theme that, I ran my own businesses for probably 15 years, and if I needed money, this is an interesting point, if I needed money, I'd go and see my bank manager. I had run a private contracting business putting in data systems. I'd go to my bank manager and I'd say, I need more money, business is growing, I need more working capital. And he said, well, how much equity do you have in your house? And I'd give him a valuation, say, okay, we'll give you 100 grand, a couple 100,000 more on your overdraft. So you're really backing yourself at that point. And then I had an experience where I created a company, a telecommunications company called Swiftel. Swiftel built one of the largest fibre optic networks here in Perth, dug up all the footpaths. Then I went to this friend of mine who was in the capital markets, equity markets, and said, look, we listed the company. I said, I'm going to need another $1 to $2 million over the next 6 months because we're actually signing up customers now and need more working capital. And having been from a private business, he said, well, give me a 20% discount in your share price and you'll have your money in 48 hours. And I said, well, what security you want? He says, I'm taking equity in your company. And the light bulb went off. I thought, no more putting your balls on the line with putting your house up. And that was 2001. So I learnt very quickly how you can develop a business, grow the business with equity, some good, some bad. But ultimately, I think if you can get success, you have a win, your shareholders have a win, and you build credibility. So 15 years ago, I was offered some assets in Peru, where we still are today. We looked at those assets, originally iron ore, copper, IOCGs, developed that, started Latin Resources. So I was managing director of Latin Resources for 15 years. And we recently sold that company to Pilbara Minerals for circa $586 million. But more of that later.
Yeah, I think you touched on it just there, aligning in shareholder best interests, and that's always really a key for any sort of investor, is knowing that there's skin in the game, but understanding that the team is doing it in the best interest of maximising return. But Mitch, yourself, you were also involved with Latin, and now you find yourself as the CEO. But a little bit about your background and history as well, because you're another, as we are in Perth, everyone's somehow related to mining, but there's always something else before it potentially.
Yeah, look, no problem, Ben, and yeah, thanks for having us. So, look, I was, born and bred in Perth, and, as you kind of start your work, as you've said, you're always exposed to kind of mining. So I worked here, I guess, in kind of accounting, finance at EY, but then moved to London and initially worked for a development bank. Looking at, I guess, progressing projects. This was in kind of Central Asia. But then I took a job at Rio Tinto and I worked there for 12 years and looked various kind of commercial, M&A, finance type roles. But, to work for such a big company, the real value is that you get to, I guess, explore different regions. So I lived in Peru for 3 years, and we'll get to that, and it's obviously highly relevant to Solis Minerals. But I lived in Brisbane, Los Angeles, London. It was a great company to work for, and really kind of plant that seed for, I guess, an appeal to mining. My last job at Rio Tinto was the CFO of battery materials, so focused on lithium, which was a very natural transition into Latin resources. And I think it's worth saying, look, working for such a big company, you get, such great skills in terms of looking at projects, processes, working with, great caliber of people. But I think for me, maybe being a bit impatient, sometimes the excitement factor is not as high because these are big companies with very stable kind of, I guess, shareholders looking for stability. I was always fascinated by capital markets and, companies that could take something from an idea to something that, was kind of Rio Tinto level, and that's talking, exploration, project development. So I started working for Latin Resources in 2023. Look, I was a shareholder before I joined. I liked the project, I liked the region, so this was, South America and Brazil. And, the journey we had there, which again we'll go into more detail on, was exhilarating, very rewarding for shareholders, a great achievement for a very small team. And so I guess, once that transaction completed in February of this year, I guess we're kind of sitting around and thinking about, what should we do next? And Chris will get into what he's up to now, a number of things. But for me, I think to try to recreate what we did at Latin Resources with Solis is an objective of mine. And so I guess that's what brings us here today.
Yeah, when I look at some of the bigger transactions that have happened, when a company is sold and there's a big dollar sign on it, there's suddenly an onus, and it's the team's done it, and there's almost this, well, they're going to go on and try and do it again and replicate it. And it's not as easy, not an overnight success, but throughout both of your respective careers, there's definitely been a focus in South America. And I might firstly go into just a little bit about that region as the Solis Minerals is operating in there. But for those that are unfamiliar with what it's like operating in this jurisdiction, we're both sitting in Perth. Naturally, it's a flight away, but what is it like operating and the mining scene within South America?
I mean, I lived in Peru for 3 years. Obviously, we were working in Brazil for 2 or 3 years for me, but Chris has been there for a lot longer. South America is a big continent, so you get countries within countries, but I think it's been very deliberate that we've had our exposure to Brazil with Latin Resources and Peru with Solis, given that, whilst they're very much developing countries, and look, I won't say they're perfect, but from a mining perspective, they're very advanced. So, the productivity that the mining teams push out, from their geos to their mining engineers to their, metallurgists, are absolutely world-class and could even rival Australia, just because mining is so important to their economies. It's fair to say that it really needs experience on the ground to move projects forward. So you are dealing with, one, a different language, two, different rules, different ways of doing things. So not for the faint-hearted, but I think once you get exposure to that part of the world, it's really quite, the promise and the potential in that part of the world is really quite infectious. So I feel that we're very lucky to have retained exposure to that part of the world, and again with the experience that we've garnered from our time working there, feel that there's real value in that for our projects and our shareholders. So again, very motivated to, I guess, bring value to that part of the world.
Well, yeah, and Chris, you've been there for nearly 15, 20 years operating
16,
in and around?
17 years, yeah.
And I can imagine one of the biggest takeaways of all of that is naturally people, the culture, and you've done it before, so that naturally provides you with a leg up on anyone that's going, I'm going to try and stake ground, but I have no idea who anyone is in the community and or in the right places in government and even mining services. So throughout that time, now in Peru, you would have had a bit of exposure there. What have you found has naturally evolved within mining in this jurisdiction, and what excites you most about SLM's opportunity operating and looking for copper, which we'll dive into?
Early days in Peru, and Mitch has worked extensively in Peru. I'm really, I suppose, privileged to have Mitch on board now as the CEO. He's got good experience there. He's very smart. What a lot of people would say to me to the early days, including my wife, what am I doing in Peru? And I quickly learnt the answer to that question is to create a sense of urgency. The Peruvian people, the Argentinian people, the Brazilian people, you'll never get anyone more loyal than those people. In actual fact, those people work for a company. They feel privileged, they feel honoured, and they're very grateful, as opposed to perhaps what's happening in Australia today, entitled, etc., etc. I won't go into that, but we built a wonderful culture. My people in Peru have been with me still, and now with Solis for 15 years.
Well, and that's not something that you can really just walk in and get, and that's what I'm sort of...
And they're very, very loyal. They appreciate what we give them, which is a good job with good money. But what's lacking there is that in Australia, I think some stats went out last year that we're now harder working than the Japanese, and that's a massive statement. We have a culture within our businesses that we're 24/7. If I pick up a phone, if Mitch picks up the phone, someone answers it on the other end, and we get things done very quickly. We have that sense of urgency about things. We don't dwindle and just wait for things to happen. We make them happen. And that's incredibly important to have in a culture. And we have to perhaps, things I have to learn is I don't very rarely have lunch, but the people in Peru and South America, lunch is there, as Mitch knows, is their time. It's not a siesta, but it's not far off it. They have their 1 or 1.5 hours for their break in the middle of the day. It's ingrown in the culture. I had to learn that culture.
Yeah,
a ritual.
Yeah, it's a ritual. And they go with their workmates and talk, and it's really quite wonderful watching it.
But again, very different to what happens in Australia.
Yeah,
sit at your desk, just
exactly
yeah,
smashing it through your
you're
food.
eating at the desk or whatever, and which we try to discourage here actually. Get out of the office, go for a walk, have a break. We learnt from them here that you can't. I actually brought a rule: you do not eat at your desk. Right, so in the early days. So look, those early days in Peru were, you learn a lot. We made a lot of mistakes. We learnt the permitting process. We went through all that. And then in 2016-17, we actually thought, this was watching Ken Brisden, who's a good friend, develop a company called Pilbara Minerals. I rang Ken and said, "What's this spodumene, mate?" He said, "Well, this is the next big thing, Chris. This is what's going to develop over the next 5-10 years. Electrification of the globe, EVs. They're going to need. So they're using brines at the moment, lithium carbonate, but we think spodumene's the next wave." So I said to the guys in Peru, I said, "Let's do a desktop study around South America." I don't want to. We looked at brines early, and we thought, it all looked a bit hard to me. 3,000-4,000 metres, evaporation ponds, etc., etc. So I thought, let's try and find some spodumene in South America. There's none in Peru. We found some in Argentina. We drilled those projects in 2017, reasonable grades, thin intercepts. So we then were shown a presentation from a company called Sigma Lithium in Brazil. We pulled the guys out of Peru from Argentina into Brazil. We engaged and employed a couple of Brazilian geologists who are still with us today. Pedro Fonseca has been incredible for us through there. The other thing we did was put in a Australian exploration manager, because my belief and what I learnt is to create that sense of urgency, you always need an expat to drive that sense of urgency, to drive the best-of-class exploration methods that we had. And we've started to build a team. Pedro, Rodrigo, Marcos, these guys, Leandro Gobbo, sorry. And we start to really build a significant team in Brazil, and that's where the success came from. My view is that in any business, the product is a given. You've got to have the product, whether that's a widget that you're trying to sell. It's got to be a good product, whether it's a hotel, whatever. It's got to be, great quality. We had a great quality project, but to make that really happen, it's all about the people. So they're the sort of early, I suppose, lessons that we learnt through South America. Peru for us was really a a test for us, and then we went to Argentina, then finally Brazil had a major success. So for me, South America geologically is quite incredible. We think in Peru, especially with copper, Peru's just gone to number 2 in the world copper producer behind Chile. It was number 3, it's now number 2. We know there's copper there, we just got to find it.
Well, that ties into really what Solis Minerals is. And now the ticker, as I said, is ASX SLM. But Mitch, for those that are unfamiliar with it, what is the company? And copper is one of the main projects and sort of objectives. But yeah, explain to us what that is for those that are unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, sure. And look, I mean, we always talk with, mining kind of communities, but I know your audience is a bit broader. But I think, the best way to think about what we do as a junior explorer is we're an incubator. So as we said, I worked for Rio Tinto for many years, and Rio Tinto manages a lot of operations that produce thousands of tons per year. But before you get to that stage, you've got to find a resource and you've got to find a project. And there are various ways of doing that. The big mining companies, BHP, Vale, Rio Tinto, look, they all have exploration teams. But there's a spot in the market for companies like us, like SLM, to do it in a more nimble fashion, to do it quicker, to do it in a more cost-effective manner. And that's really the segment of the market that we fill. So we have to back ourselves, and we've got great shareholders that give us money, and it's a high risk, high reward kind of game. But the objective for us, and we're focused on copper and gold in southern Peru, is that across our portfolio, and we've got 5 projects at the moment, 3 that we'll drill this year, is that we can find one of those projects that, look, you never know, we could push to be a development project one day and take it into production. But the more likely scenario is that we find something that's got a lot of potential, do the studies, do the permitting, and then we hand over to a party, a big mining company that's got the credentials to operate it.
Yeah.
And that's really part of the food chain that we feel, and that's what we do with Latin Resources. It's a common pathway for companies in our sector, but I mean, the potential in South America, the lack of capital that's been spent there in the ground as compared to a WA or perhaps Canada is really the edge that we're targeting. So it's early days. We've just started drilling. We've seen some mineralisation, so heading in the right direction. But that's really what our company's about. So copper and gold, finding a project and bringing it to market in South America.
Well, I know a lot have seen the gold price rise, and that's been front and centre on pretty much every news outlet for ASX. But quietly, to an extent, copper has been incredibly bullish, and the price has exploded. And I know I've talked about it previously about some of the macro factors that are impacting it, and almost the silent beauty of copper. No one really shows it any love, but it's used in absolutely everything, and it's that position that we're finding whereby with a lot of resources, but copper in particular, the supply is being outstripped by the demand, and there's this eventual squeeze of less and less projects coming online and mine life's coming to a conclusion. And you're both seeing this pretty much every single day, but for those that are maybe not seeing what's underlying with the copper market and demand, I mean, what have you been seeing over the last 12 months that excites you a lot about potentially, uncovering a next IOCG deposit?
My first job in mining was working for Rio Tinto, and that was in the M&A team in London, and that was copper M&A. And when you're looking at copper M&A, there's really just 2 parts of the world that you're looking at. It's kind of the African copper belt, so DRC, Zambia, or South America, Peru, Chile, a little bit outside of there, but they're basically the 2 regions. So that was kind of my baptism into the world of mining. So that's really stuck with me, and I really like copper. I think there's a lot of big personalities. Your Robert Friedlands of the world, your big mining companies, your projects and operations that almost have personalities. But I guess to your question as to what are the dynamics that we're seeing is that I used to work very closely with the supply-demand team. And look, on the demand side, I think the biggest thing over the past 5 years, which you can't avoid, is EVs and these massive batteries that they have. No matter what chemistry you're kind of looking at, the copper intensity of these vehicles is like 4 times an ICE vehicle. So that's a very big catalyst for growth. But copper is such a mature market. It's 24 million tonnes per annum. There's copper, as you say, in everything. It's the best conductor of electricity that we have at the moment, or at least the most efficient. It is a bellwether of the economy, and despite everything going on in the world at the moment, everything's still trucking along pretty well. So the demand side is not a risk. We're going to keep growing at 3 to 4 to 5% each year. The supply side is where it gets a bit more interesting. So you've got these massive mines in South America, Escondida, Chuquicamata. In Peru, you've got Antamina. They've been around for ages. Toquepala as well, 60 years, and they're getting deeper. The grade is reducing, so the quality of the ore that's going through the plant, it's getting more expensive to mine. It's getting riskier because you're having to go underground. So you kind of have these two forces working to really support a long-term price, which is really quite attractive for companies like us. So demand's growing, supply's getting tougher, so that you're going to need new feedstock. And, by design, look, we're not chasing copper projects that are 3 kilometres underground. The big mining companies can search for those. But our kind of niche in the market is finding projects that can come to market in the next 5 years and can add meaningful supply into this imbalance that really exists because of those factors I mentioned. So we think it's an attractive market on the copper front. Obviously, gold has just gone, bonkers, but, that volatility is quite intense. But, I guess both metals provide us a really nice backwind for what we're doing at the moment. And, we raised $4.5 million in February, and that was, very well supported. And I think just going to the fact that there is a lot of capital out there chasing these sorts of projects. So, so hopefully those prices stay high. And
speaking of the projects, you've got quite a few areas in the limelight, but can you explain a little bit about what you've got in the portfolio? And we're speaking now because there's been some drilling results that have come out, just initial, but there's quite an active calendar ahead in regards to just updates. But what have you really got in your portfolio of projects, and a little bit about where they are, some of the accessibility, because for a lot of people, you don't, unless you've been to Peru, you probably don't know. I've never been, but just paint the picture of what it's actually like there and where you've got some of these projects.
Very deliberate strategy. So again, Peru is, Chile and Peru are the two biggest producers of copper globally. They share the same, Andean corridor of copper production. So if you're going to be looking for copper, there's really no better place to start. And southern Peru is where the majority of copper in that country comes from. And so, as Chris said, Latin Resources had its start there, picked up some very good ground. In the last, say, 3 to 4 years, we've picked up a lot of additional concessions. So we currently have 69,000 hectares, which, is just a random number. But by comparison to a lot of big mining companies, that's a massive amount of, footprint. And the benefit of having such a big footprint is that over the past 3 years, we've whittled that down to really 3 targets that we're going to drill this year. So we've started drilling Chanchol Palo, which is one project. We have another project, Ilo Este, which will start soon after finishing the drill program at Chanchol Palo. And we have another one that we picked up in the last year and a half called Cinto, which is next to this very big operating mine. Copper has been the lifeblood of Solis since it dual listed on the ASX in 2021. There was a brief kind of look at lithium in Brazil, and we still have some very attractive concessions there. But the way that the market's kind of gone, and we can go into it in a little bit later, it's really not where we feel that we should be deploying shareholder funds. And so it's really a story of southern Peru. We're always open to other opportunities, but the projects that we have and the quality that we've had from, again, I won't get too technical, but you do all these magnetic studies, you look for anomalies, you look for geochemistry, which is mineralization at surface. We feel that we've got 3 projects that can really, deliver on our objective, which is finding that large copper gold project that can come to market one day. So we'll drill them this year, and off the back of the success of those, look to develop the portfolio further. So it's a really exciting time for shareholders. They've, helped us through, the last few years and the permitting and all the preparation that you do. But now's the time when the rubber really hits the road. We're drilling, and so lots of news flow in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and one of the bits that I saw was the announcement on the 23rd, which was an initial, two drill holes that were done, and some of the initial readings from it. I know it's at the lab, and there's probably going to be assays and other further information coming out. And I believe the drill got moved to one of the other targets, which will be coming out. But for those, there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of content on there. Breaking that down, what is that already? Again, not getting ahead of ourselves, but on the initial, how do you best describe that to investors that may or may not understand, similarly to me, what is exactly on these long written ASX announcements?
Yeah, look, so I'll give you a summary. And there's been so much anticipation. So we've just started the drill program. So we announced on the 23rd of June. We started drilling early in June, but we've just finished the first hole. So it's 713 metres, I think. And look, I thought I was impatient until I met Chris, but poor exploration team dealing with both of us. There was a lot of pressure on this drilling program. I mean, every dollar is vital. As I said, to actually be different to the big mining companies, we've got to be more, agile, cost effective, etc. So every dollar matters. And fortunately for us, our first drill hole delivered as expected. So there's a bit of cover with this target, so you have to get through a bit of soil. But, as I guess a big vindication or validation of the strategy of the team, we did hit mineralisation. It is only visual mineralisation. So as you say, the assays go to be analysed, and there's a scientific approach to actually getting numbers that kind of mean anything. But given that we were seeing, the makings of a ISCG and porphyry system in that first drill hole, which got to 713 metres, and then at metre 620 we saw some visible gold. It's not often too customary, but we thought, look, we better cleanse the market on this news because, for us it is something significant. So it is very promising in terms of what we're looking to achieve. As you mentioned, we are onto our second drill hole. It is the same project. We'll do 4 to 5 drill holes at this project, Chanchol Palo, and we own it 100%, so we have lots of flexibility. But then once that program's done, we move on to a next project, which is called Ilo Este. So for a very small cap, market cap today is 11, kind of 12 mil Aussie. To have 2 projects which show a lot of promise, which are being drilled in the next few months, I mean, there's an enormous catalyst there for shareholders. So, yeah, I think we're just excited to get in and drill it out and deliver that good news. So it's all kind of underway.
Yeah, and I think I know I saw on the announcement that the assays will be July, August. Now there's no date. So I'm assuming at some point in the foreseeable months there'll be further updates. But you touched on in this that there's going to be considerable further drilling planned and quite an active schedule. So what else is really shaping up across these three identified areas for the next 3 to 12 months? As we know in ASX land investors and similar, they're always hounding people for more news flow, and that sort of translates to board and directors putting the pressure, as you said, onto the next level. But what's the outlook for the next handful of weeks and months in regards to that quite active drilling and exploration campaign?
Yeah, look, so very much focused on those first 2 projects. So Chanchol Palo is live drilling, so there's going to be lots of news flow. We say kind of July, August because there is a process to do things properly. You've got to go through the labs. You've got to get your announcement done, CP to sign off on it. So, there is, I guess, a few unknowns that you have to work through before you get that information in a proper, I guess, method out to the market. So we'll work through that, but obviously as soon as it comes available, it's out there in the market. Then to start drilling at Ilo Este is going to be a big one. And then we have Sinto towards the back end of the year, which is a newer project, but one that looks very attractive. I guess what we do owe to our shareholders, though, is that we're going to focus on our portfolio, and that's what we've been given money to drill. But we're never, we never knock back a phone call or the opportunity to look at other projects. So we've always got our eyes open just to say, look, we've got some capital. Where's the best place to deploy it? And if other opportunities present, look, we'll definitely consider them. And I think that's really the benefit of having the success from Latin Resources. As an ASX company, there's not many of us in that part of the world. We do get, I guess, privy to a lot of projects that others probably don't, because the ASX is actually quite a hotbed of capital availability for, base metal and precious metal exploration. The TSXV has been challenged in the past few years. The London Stock Exchange as well has probably not attracted that much capital, but we do have a bit of a competitive advantage here in that I think we do get access to good projects. We also have access to good capital given the relationships that we've built. So, we'll be looking at organic but also inorganic opportunities in the next 6 to 12 months.
And really the systematic approach is exactly what was executed at Latin, and that's what you talked about before, Chris, was that it's the people, it's the foundation, and what you've done there, I can imagine you've learned a lot, as you said, and mistakes, but have learned from it, and probably applying a similar, if not a better process now to Solis. And one of the natural parts of this is realistically getting up land access and working. I'm not fully familiar with what it's like with people that own the land and the farmers, and you could probably shed a bit more light on it. But that's probably been a lot of the work that's been previously done, but there's still work to do. But how important has that been for putting SLM in quite a unique position as opposed to others that are trying to operate now in the hotbed of copper in Peru that haven't necessarily had those 15 years of doing it, meeting, handshaking every person, and have now just seen, I want copper, I'm going to go to Peru and try and make it work?
Yeah, look, I think there's some scar tissue which you only get from experience. Like, I mean, you have to suffer to I guess kind of improve as an organisation, and it's really down to, again, the people that you get on board. But to really kind of give you just a quick, sharp response, we've got a team that's very agile. We've got very good consultants. We've had some learnings even from Solis, from permitting in the past kind of few years that we've improved upon. So I think we've got the kind of outfit now that can really deliver on that incubator, which is, very quick go, no go on projects, and whether that's drilling or even before drilling, making those decisions. Because in our business, really, really, like, time is everything. So, we have money, it costs money to run a business. We've got to make decisions very quickly to generate value for shareholders. So I've just really built a team and then supplemented that with our experience. But yeah, no, look, it can be a challenge, things like land access and permitting. But I mean, having worked there for many years now, we feel that we have an advantage. So yeah,
I think the other thing is too that Solis, I'm not making excuses, but it's been run part time for the last few years, because we dual listed Solis in 2021, and the guys in Canada, good guys, but they had other things and there wasn't a greater focus. That's why we actually listed in Australia. We had an executive director that was sort of running Solis, and, we haven't had a full-time CEO in Solis until Mitch joined the company. And the whole idea of getting Mitch join the company and focus 100% of his time on the business is going to make a massive difference, because you have to have, absolute clarity, focus 24/7 on any business to make it successful. You have to live and breathe, and people say that, but they don't understand it. 24/7, nothing else but the company. People say put your family first, get a balance in life. It's all bullshit. Mm. If you want to have a success in something, and Mitch has got that, and that's why I was chosen for. I worked with Mitch for 3 years in Latins and saw how hard he works, and this was his next step. And I encouraged him to take the job, because I just know that he is 24/7, lives and breathes it. He's been in Peru twice in the last 3 months. Because, Chris, I've got to go. I've got to get this thing sorted out. That's a leader. Solis has never had that. And talking about people, you need a leader to lead your people. You need to lead from the front. You need to have someone to say, I'm over here again, and I'm going to keep coming over here until we get it right, until we get the permits and start drilling. You showed tremendous leadership in a little over 3 months. So that's why. I think the company's going to be tremendously successful. All it takes, as per the Latin story, is one hit, and then you're on. Then you're on.
And it all comes back to what's previously been done, and I think that's probably, if anything, quite the excitement, is that you both have a track record of doing it. And naturally, we've seen it with a lot of big CEOs and really geos that have discovered it, gone on, develop it, or sold it, and they almost have this. They know how to do it. It's not as easy.
Let me give you the stats on that comment, right? How many listed companies on ASX, Ben?
It's 1 in 1,000 I know make a project. 1 in 1,000.
No, but how many listed companies on ASX? 2,750. How many junior mining companies on ASX?
800?
950.
Oh, there's been a few more. Okay.
750 are within a 2-kilometre radius of where we're sitting here in West Leederville. 10% have a discovery, 8 to 10% have a discovery, 3 to 5% go into production. Well, very, very low, sort of success rate.
Yeah, is this your first CEO position role? And you've built it up. It's naturally the next step. But for you personally, I mean, what is one of the most exciting bits about taking on this new opportunity and really divesting and focusing 100% on repeating it and joining part of that club that finds the next big copper discovery?
Yeah, look a lot. And so, I mean, we're still working with a lot of similar, team members and elements that we had during the Latin days. So it still feels, very small, like a startup and really working towards a common goal. But, from a personal perspective, I mean, I lived in Peru for 3 years and, have just like a natural, I guess, connection with that part of the world. I speak fluent Spanish. I know probably as many people there as I do in Perth because I just lived away for so long. Again, a lot of experience in
You
copper.
left out the Peruvian wife, mate.
Yeah. A wife from Arequipa and family kind of across Peru, so a very strong family connection as well. I mean, there'd be nothing for me more professionally and personally rewarding than finding a project of scale that we can, I guess, take to the next level. So, I mean, that's the to Chris's point, having that dogged kind of determination to make it happen. For me, there's a really strong intersection there, both professionally and personally. And yeah, look, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So that's what really motivates me, and I guess pushes me to really drive good results for our shareholders.
And it was breadcrumbed earlier, but part of SLM is also lithium. And now, personally, when I started the podcast, lithium was everything everyone wanted to talk about. And even me coming in and experiencing the lithium cycles, it is a very sporadic, and the highs and the lows are quite substantial. And undoubtedly, the electric vehicle market has been growing, and you've seen it all across Europe, some of the standards they're setting for where the future of transport, but let alone everything, needs to go to. But quite quietly, you've got that on the side. And Chris, I know you naturally know a lot about lithium, and you talked about Sigma. I know you're very close, and you speak quite well of that company and the leader. I forget her name, but the CEO, Anna. That's right. The lithium market, very dynamic, but what's been unfolding there simultaneously, and the focus for SLM isn't there at the moment, rightfully because the lithium market isn't where it's at. But as that does change, I mean, what are you seeing unfold in the lithium market, as well as just that slight other option that investors get exposure with in SLM?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, you're right, it is a dynamic market. That's an interesting term for it. But lithium basically goes up and it comes down. Everyone keeps leaning towards the Chinese spot price. I can tell you now, it's not accurate. I'm actually still working with Pilbara. I've a consultant with Pilbara a couple of days a week. I've learned a lot since working with Pilbara. They have guys in Africa looking what's happening. The Pilbara, or PLS now, are probably one of the best run companies I've ever seen. Dale Henderson leads those guys tremendously well, extremely smart, get a lot of intelligence out of the lithium markets in China, Africa, that type of thing. So what I've learned over the last 3 months with Pilbara or PLS, is that the market will do what the market will do. It's supply-demand. Supply-demand rules everything. What intrigues me is that EVs are still growing at 20% this year. I think that we're seeing energy storage systems, they grew at 55% this year, and that is, 2024. There's tremendous amount of growth in the market. It's not making sense to me is why we know that stockpiles in China are very low. We know that Africa is providing very spasmodic type of delivery of lithium, low grade, some high grade. They have nothing like a mine like Pilgangoora or Wodgina, which provides a quality product on time, every time. So it's a bit strange what's happening out there, but we also understand that China controlled 95% of the market. And once China controlled 90% of the market, they'll control the price. So what I actually attribute all this to is we used to have a slide in the Latin deck that showed the horse and cart, and then a picture of the horse and cart back in the late 1800s and the T-model Ford. And that transition took something like 15 years for people to move from horse and cart to the T-model Ford to a combustion engine. So we're at a very, very preliminary stage of the electrification of the globe. But you young guys are going to look, when you can, another analogy I make is when we first started getting flat screen TVs, you'd pay $8-10 grand for the latest flat screen TV. You can walk into JB Hi-Fi now or Harvey Norman and pick the latest TV up for $1,200-1,500. Yeah. The cars are not a mass-produced item yet. They're not dropping in price. BYD, amazing company. I've actually spent 4 hours with Stella Lee, the CEO of BYD in Brazil a couple of years ago. She's an incredibly smart person, Harvard MBA, blah, blah. They are such a good company, and they produce the best batteries in the world. Now, forget Carol. BYD produced the best energy storage system batteries, and at a very low price. So once that price point comes down, people of the world realise that I've had an EV for 12 months or 2 years now, but I put my EV in for a 2-year service a couple of months ago. You know, when you put your car in for a service every 3 months, you know...
I don't do it that frequently. I'm probably a bad example.
Okay,
I don't really service my car very often.
When you put your car in to have a service, there's no change out of $1,000 to $2,000. The last 2 years of my EV, the bill's been zero. I haven't changed the tyres on them, right? So when people understand, and as renewable energy comes through, all of a sudden we have a battery system in our garage. It's powered by sun. At night it charges the car. You're not paying fuel prices through the roof. And you go to get your car services costing zero. People got to catch on to that really, really quick. They're catching on to it now, but watch what happens.
Yeah, well, the big thing's always been the price.
The general street consensus for lithium prices was 2025. It's been pushed out to 2027. It's $1,300 to $1,500. As Dale has said and publicly said, I'm not saying it and talking out of school here. Pilbara will be printing PLS. I'll call. I love the. Call them PLS, will be printing money again in 2 years because they're such a well-run company. They bought Latin to have a global reach, so Brazil will be feeding the European and US markets, and they're still very immature, but they will catch up. Pilbara, PLS, will be printing money again in 2 years' time, maybe a bit sooner towards the end of next year. 50% of the population within the next 10 years will be driving an EV. There's no stopping it. Now, a lot of people say that it's dead, combustion engine lives forever. Let's see. But when that supply-demand curve turns, and certainly every bank, including Goldman Sachs and UBS, 2030, there's going to be a deficit of lithium. Everyone agrees with that. By 2030, we'll require 2.7 to 3 million tonnes of lithium, and there'll be only 2.2 to 2.5 million tonnes out there available. I think some of that hasn't even taken account that a lot of these lithium mines that were getting up are not getting up because they can't get the money to build the mines. So watch this space.
Yeah, well, I can just anecdotally say the BYDs, you're seeing them almost everywhere in Perth.
How many sharks are seen like
I know.
that?
Well, everyone likes their trucks.
Sharks are everywhere.
They're massive as well, the hybrids.
I just drove past BYD coming here, and I saw this beautiful Latin orange, BYD shark sitting out the front. I'm going to drop in there tomorrow.
No one's going to hit you. Yeah.
60 grand.
Oh, 60 grand out the door, and it's got 1,100 kilometre range, 0 to 100 in 6 seconds. I mean, Hilux, and other models won't be selling.
Watch. And BYD is showing the way, right?
Yeah.
They're an amazing company, amazing.
Yeah, you physically could see it everywhere, and it used to be. Tesla still has its massive point, and I think that was the pioneer in showing that you can start making these cars with incredible tech. And yeah, your point about you don't need to go on for service. I'd heard stories that it almost software updates just by internet, and you'd almost just like a phone overnight, it would just update itself, and then you've got the newest software patch or something, and it completely upends a whole new industry. But your analogy about the horse and carts, completely upheaved by the traditional combustion engine.
You look at Tesla's next wave, and Elon's, he's going to have these driverless vehicles. So your Tesla will be sitting at work in the car. It won't be sitting in the car.
No, it's the Uber and Airbnb model, isn't it?
I was in San Francisco 6 weeks ago, and I jumped in Waymo, one of those driverless cars, with two mates. It freaks you out.
Yeah.
It actually freaks you out, and... We're going to see a wave of the next revolution is going to be autonomous, and it's all going to be electric.
And
it's not going to be combustion.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to go through this massive shift from horse and cart to T-model Ford. We're about to see the T-model Ford, or the Ranger, the Ford Ranger, move into the BYD Shark. That's what I'm thinking we're going to see next. And other things like drones. How many lithium batteries have gone down in Ukraine war in the last, how much lithium's been used in the drones warfare?
Well, and even I look at distribution paths, the trucks that drive all over Europe constantly. You don't really see it in Australia, but there's that whole distribution network that will also
UPS trucks and stuff.
Yeah, and they'll start
100%.
converting. Then I don't know how long it'll take for a giant boat. Who knows? These are all the things that are naturally going to progress as well.
Have you been into China? Like 80% of vehicles on the road, from motorbikes, cars to trucks, 80% are electric, and there's very limited noise just from the tires. So good for lithium and also the copper intensity, but it's the
that's the other point
sailed.
too, Mitch. Copper. The reason why there's 4 times more copper in an EV than a conventional vehicle is because you're actually transferring DC voltage, not AC. So this is all AC, and here that cable going into that power point, there's 2.5 square millimetre of copper. A DC copper lead that you have to put in an EV is 15 mil thick versus 2 mil thick for copper in a general vehicle. So that massive use of EV copper and energy systems, you look at when you've got your battery lead, you see the size on your battery, you'll see the size of that lead is 3 times, 4 times the size of a going to a power point, because that's AC power versus DC power. So that's where all copper, with electrification of the world, is also going to get moved. New grid systems, aluminium mostly for the high voltage, but when you transfer down to AC, you'll have copper everywhere.
No, I think exactly that. It's the next revolution of the way in which people commute, but just the entire world.
But
and
for those
everything
people
is
out there,
digitalised.
Ben, those shareholders out there, investors are going to be saying, why didn't I put more money into lithium companies when they were down at the bottom of the pile? We should have done that, right? Because PLS, the old Pilbara, is a classic story. I hear stories all the time. I had Pilbara and it was 10 cents and went to $6. Here's your opportunity again.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you believe in electrification of the world, you've got to believe in Pilbara. And that's one of the reasons we did the deal with Pilbara. Great company, well-run company, but we gave our investors the opportunity to say, look, we saw a little bit of the writing on the wall when Mitch and I were doing a lot of work with banks to raise capital to build our plant. But we actually saw, we went to fast markets in 2023, and it was a different dynamic in 2024, right? The largest lithium conference in the world. And the banks were starting to pull back. So we made the decision to go with the strength in an ASX 100 company where we knew they had the balance sheet to build our plant and to go forward. But more importantly, we gave our investors, our shareholders, the opportunity to be part of something bigger. It was a great deal. A lot of people say to me, walk up and said, your timing was unbelievable. And I said, well, there's a little bit out. We may have got a little bit more, but what we've allowed our investors to do is to get ASX 100 scrip. And they elect to sell it or keep it, it's up to them. But at the end of the day, if they believe in electrification of the world, EVs, energy storage systems, you've got to believe in PLS as a company. You must believe in them because I think they're the best lithium company in the world today.
Yeah, today I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've touched on copper, SLM, the lithium market, and you both gentlemen live and breathe this practically every hour of every day. And I think if I pull it back to where we started, which was about SLM, and as expected, a lot of the audience here are investors. They may have their CMC account. They're trying to figure out where they want to deposit money potentially. And at your point, I think psychology of investors, there's very much an interest in the I'm in and out quickly. The long-term investors are hard to find, and the loyalty, I think, is something that people will still gradually trying to relearn almost. But in encapsulating the conversation today, if there was key points for investors to know about SLM and the future of this company, what would you urge them to remember about this conversation today?
Yeah, look, pretty simple. So, copper, gold, focused on, the right commodities and ones that have a lot of macro support at the moment. Jurisdiction, copper, gold, both very strong out of Peru and that broader kind of South American kind of Andean copper belt. So I think we're in the right postcode. Team, a majority of the board and management team speak fluent Spanish. All of the board have worked in and around South America developing projects. So we've got a team that's done it before, and look, we'll definitely do it again. And then from a corporate perspective, look, we've got cash in the bank, very clean structure, very supportive shareholders. So look, we don't see our top 20 move around at all. We're really poised for, any good news can really see this company run. So that's what we're looking to deliver in the next few months.
And that's, I suppose, from a company perspective, but look at the shareholder perspective. We've got 41 million shares on issue. Tri-Fining Company's got 141 million shares on issue in the ASX, junior miner. We've got a market cap just over $10 million. Share price is sitting around 8-9 cents. I can remember back in 22 when Latin Resources market cap was $5 to $8 million. January of 2022, we had our discovery hole of in March of 2022. Stock went from half a cent to 20 cents within 2 months. We raised $35 million at 16 cents from one discovery hole. It's all about having that discovery hole in the ground. Let's not beat around the bush. We have to have a discovery. As Mitch said, there's 5 projects, copper projects, in one of the best copper jurisdictions in the world, second best in actual fact. We have 3 projects we're drilling over the next 6 months. Now the permitting's done, we're on our way. One hole can change this company around in milliseconds. I mean milliseconds. So 10 million to 100 million market cap with I think you need to have a resource to be able to get to that point. But one discovery hole can certainly add a lot of value to the company very, very quickly. Now it's up to the boys in the field. They've got them the money. Let's find the stuff. And then one of our another analogies, I believe, is what we used to say, our geologists, we don't, and a dear old geologist friend of mine used to tell me, we don't pay geologists to look for them, we pay them to find it. And that's the culture we run through this company. We're not paying you to look for it, we're paying you to find it. It's worked well for us in the past. I
can imagine in the kitchen there's a pin-up board with quite a few different quotes and or analogies that are sought upon and almost instilled in the team. But as expected, this is listed on the ASX under code SLM. There's a website for investors, potential, current, future, any of them that want to reach out, potentially contact the two of you or just get more information from what's happening and where can they go and how can they reach out to you both or the team.
Yeah, look, so we put out a lot of announcements. We really try to keep that transparency with our shareholders and stakeholders. So look, via LinkedIn, we've got our email addresses listed. We have very close relationships with our shareholders and the broker community. So yeah, do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And I mean, it's been great to share a little bit. So so thank you very much, Ben, for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah,
thanks, Ben.
I was about to say the exact same thing. You both have been in it for a long time. You know your stuff, and it's a very exciting new phase of a new company. And yeah, thank you both for speaking with the show.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for listening to the Marketable podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Marketable on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.